What I want to talk about this evening is about being a Catholic today, in a Catholic family, a layperson. What's our Catholic identity? Focusing on standards, what we hold as standards as families and for our kids. And not so much, I don't think we get tied up too bad in what we should do or shouldn't do. That's pretty clear, I think, in a lot of cases. The church tells us that. I think where we get caught up a lot and where we slip and make mistakes and our kids end up suffering for it is in the areas where it may be a gray area, not a gray area, but some things that are acceptable, but we don't moderate well. We may get a little too loose in certain areas. And so I just want to talk about certain areas that I've experienced as a parent where we really need to be careful. We need to keep our guard up and not go too far into those certain things. Personally, I believe it, along the lines of being Catholic today, I think it is an exciting time to be Catholic. We're at an exciting point in church history. And that we look at a couple of generations ago, maybe 3, where the church was and it was enjoying a pretty good bit of glory, I guess you might call it. And the world getting along with it. The church never gets along with the world, but the world kind of getting along with the church in a lot of places. And we watch a lot of Vortex here, and he brings out a lot of the problems, and it seems like everything's problems. And he has said we're at the worst point ever in church history of where the church is, because worldwide, it's not doing well. And for the most part, his information is accurate. He's a newsman, and negative sells. And sometimes the way he presents it, it looks like it's hopeless. And you look at, we're in the phase of a new pontificate, a few months into this. And how would you like to be in Pope Francis's shoes with the things that are on his plate? Walking in. None of his responsibility for the most part, and having to take on the issues that he's having to take on between banking scandals and homosexuality within the Curia potentially, supposedly, and the worldwide dissension even amongst the clergy and bishops. So leaders fix problems. Successful people fix problems. And I want, through the things I'm doing right now, I want y'all to know that there are very many devout Catholics still out there. Like most of us, they're being suppressed. They're there. So take heart in that and know that they are there. And what I have been telling people is, I'm in this game to win. And we just went over the Declaration of Independence. It is Independence Day, 4th of July. And those men were at a point in their history, and they did it for political reasons, for the reasons between them and the king. And what they were doing at that point, they might not have seen the fruits of it. But they knew they were laying a road, a foundation for future generations. That's the way I look at it, as far as what we're doing for the church right now as laymen. And so I tell people, we're going to win this thing, because we already know. We already know that. Because we're just doing our part to help fulfill Christ's promise that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. How much more important is it to do this for the church than to do it for political reasons or for our country and nation? That's the fight we have on our hands. We as parents need to lead from that standpoint and raise our children from that standpoint. And we need to build a strength into our children, into our kids. We need to raise them with a strength to face things that way and to know what they're up against. If they're weak, then look at the persecution that's coming against the church. What is their likelihood of giving up the faith under persecution if we allow weakness to be built into them? Anybody read the lives of the saints? Okay. We do that on a daily basis in my home at breakfast. Why? And how we started out as, remember when I was working with the school, I would give out that calendar for Lent, and part of the practices during the Lent exercises was to read the saint of the day, and it became a habit, and I felt like we ought to keep that going because of the fruit it was bearing, I thought, in what we were instilling there with the kids. So we do that, and I take kind of a more moderate version. There's very many different versions of Lives of the Saints. Some are very graphic. Some are very much watered down and childish. So I try to go middle of the road and then take it and explain whenever it's maybe get a little complicated, certain areas, just take time to explain. And I'll be light with it. If there's a saint with a funny name, I might, play that up, or if he was from a city with a funny name, and just to keep them alert and give them try to get them to get something from it. But often, not always, you had saints canonized for different reasons. Often you'll have martyrs, and we try to show them that sometimes they don't. Sometimes they were just very devout or very heroic, but a lot of times they were martyred. But are we building into our kids the concept of being courageous enough to die for the faith? Because we're talking about persecution here, and I'm not saying to scare them. I don't believe in that. Because a lot of times, with fundamentalists, sometimes they try to scare people into doing things. And I try to take a more positive approach of, like I say, living out loud and being on fire for the faith and being heroic and uncompromising. Uncompromising. Where so many things are allowed to be expressed out in the marketplace, are our children being taught to be able to express their point of view. Because what I'm finding out is that when you speak out, you'll find that there's a lot of people that are thinking the same thing. They're just also a bit afraid to speak up, but you affirm what they know to be true, and you end up getting more people behind you. But Ben, my 5-year-old, he's a big fan of John the Baptist, because with the saint party that we do with school, he was John the Baptist one time. So every time he hears John the Baptist, that's a big deal to him. I guess because he ate locusts and wore hair or something like that, but that's something that attracts him. But there you go. What did John the Baptist do? He spoke out against the king and his lifestyle and the sin he was committing, and he lost his head for it. A very heroic saint in the past. So let's talk about standards a little bit. And first, I want to talk about, and again, these are some things that there may be a little bit of leeway or differing amongst people. But first, with modesty and dress for the girls. And a lot of times we say, we express things or say, well, how do we, what things need to be said? A lot of times we need to be reminded. We don't necessarily need to be taught something. We just need to be reminded. So I got about 50 copies of the Mary-like Standards of Dress to be passed around, and it should be enough, one for everybody. If there's extras, keep them and pass them on to other people. But just for you to know and be reminded what they are, because we're noticing that not everybody is holding up to these standards. And we should be. We all should be. And I was in contact with a young lady. She had just graduated high school, had asked us to look at something on their Facebook page, what they were doing. She was gathering some young people, teenagers, who were on YouTube that were very active in the Catholic faith. They were doing a good thing. And so I went and looked at a few things, and I said, y'all are doing good work, but be sure that your YouTubers are dressing appropriately when they film themselves. And she says, well, I have no control over that, but is anyone in particular you're talking about? So I mentioned which one it was. And she says, oh, well, we got people from different cultures. Compromise. Rationalization. This is Catholic. It's called Catholic because it's universal amongst all cultures. That's where it kicks in. It doesn't matter. But in talking, she's one of these, went to one of these very prominent high schools and is educated in these things. And going to college, big college. So she's going for, and what do when they get into these educational situations? They start to massage certain things. And so then you have compromise. And so in holding up these standards, men, it's our job. Understand. Because, we should be able to see things. And what happens is, well, you get the response, well, it's so hard to find something, that's appropriate. And if you shoot something down, they're disappointed. Your wife is disappointed. Too bad. Too bad. It's good. It's better to have a little bit disappointment now and maybe some awkward, hurt feelings than to have somebody in trouble or provoke somebody else to sin. And there's various ways of handling it. It can be discreet. I've had times where something may be a little bit over the line, and I'll just, from my own judgment, I'll say that's not appropriate. Well, I'll just go to my wife and say, well, tell such and such that's not appropriate. Now they know to check anything new, to pass it by me. But again, it falls on us to do, because we as men know when something might be looked at provocatively, and we don't want to allow that. We don't want to participate in that. Another thing on standards on neatness, and let's look at our sons. Same thing with dress, and how are they into this grunge look, or do they have an appropriate type of attire that they're wearing? And none of what I'm talking about is, burlap sack or looking like, you're Amish or anything like that. They are dignified styles that are stylish and acceptable today, where you don't look like you're sticking out. But, look at military dress, that's very dignified, and but it doesn't, there's no negative look to it at all. Hairstyles, into the pointy hair, or some kind of this, whatever kind of styles that these boys are coming around with, skateboard hair or whatever they call it. Because we are identified as Catholic. And what people should see in us whenever they come across us or our children, our kids, should be something that's edifying. You know, they look upon that and say, there's hope for the world. And it's coming from the Catholics. Groups. That expression, I remember when we were first parents, a lot of people were coming out with, don't club your kids. Meaning, don't put them in a bunch of clubs running the rat race, you know. And I understand there's certain things that we as families can't all do, or you can get them in more things that may not be available to us as families. But this, again, something we need to moderate, watch who we're putting our kids around. Anytime we start doing things in groups, especially when they are not of like mind, like we're talking about, like we have here, you open up yourself for some exposure. We shouldn't have to rely on groups and organizations for the kids to instill virtues and character into our kids. That should be happening at home, standalone, without anything from outside. Movies and television, you know, one of my favorite things to pick on. I just think it needs to be very much limited. And, you know, in our home we just use the TV itself more for sports, and I look at it from the perspective of something that I'm interested in. But because of I want to show the kids there's always a lesson, the amount of discipline and sportsmanship and effort that go into succeeding in these things. But then that could get to be overboard too. You know, again, moderation and tempering. Because, you know, even with, I remember long ago Michael Pearl saying, you know, I'd much rather have, and he was talking about little kids, you know, have my little ones, instead of being in front of a good, wholesome Christian video, out there, you know, hacking on a tree or something, out there doing something active, because it stifles the creativity the more they sit in front of that thing, even if it's good programming, which is very difficult to find. We shouldn't be using it as a babysitter. And then lastly, just a worldly influence in general. You know, the more you go out, the more you're influenced by the culture. And even the strongest person, that's why, you know, I set up things the way I did for myself, just to not be out there as much. And men, we have to work. You know, that's part of the cross we bear. And I like to have my wife at home with the kids and not running the roads, even if they're errands to run. Try to limit it to a certain day of the week. Very, very much limited of this running around and being around all of the madness that we have around us. Again, it weakens, and it can easily get away from you. But men, if we are not paying attention, we won't see these things. We won't see it happening. But I noticed with my wife, it was, you know, it started being a habit, especially outside of school. You know, you don't have that thing you got to do as much during the summer. It's like, oh, we need this, oh, we need that, oh, we need it, and just see going and going and going. It's like, whoa, time out. And you start seeing the behavior in the children change because nobody's there. Or somebody's there, but they're watching each other, kind of thing. So, you know, you have to rein it in. We have to be present, though, and we have to be paying attention to be able to catch these things. If we're not there, if we're not around, then we'll miss it. And we might say, well, time. We got to make time. What's more important? You know, yeah, we do have the commitment of the job, but what are all the other things that we're involved with, and how much they're occupying our time? Someone was sharing me with something that they had a friend who was going through with their family some pretty serious problems. And the thing was, and the kind of stuff that I would never want to see happen, and the guy knew, he knew better. He knew better. And that's it. We could look around the world and see, not a lot of people have the kind of support group we have and the knowledge that we have of what we're supposed to do. But sometimes people will know and they just won't do. Why? I have no idea. Boggles my mind. But how much more accountable will we be held when we knew, as opposed to the person who's ignorant, who just didn't have that kind of foundation, didn't have somebody. I mean, even the priest won't, some of the priests won't teach this because maybe they're ignorant, maybe they grew up in a dysfunctional home, who knows. So to wrap, being Catholic today, we have to build that strength into our kids by not, primarily by what we do at home, but by default, not by allowing those weaknesses to be built into them, to face whatever the degree of persecution that may come across us, because I'm looking over the long haul and things happen slow in the church. And for us to get this thing back, I may never see it, but my children or my grandchildren or whatever may eventually see that. But we got to start laying the groundwork right now, being authentically Catholic. God bless you.